think we've saved the best for last, right? What we got, Margot? I think Cal is our last speaker.
Oh no, I'm not sure we saved the best for last though.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. Own it.
Yeah, there we go.
Own it. You are Grazing Grass Podcast. Is that right?
That is correct.
All right. How many of you put in the chat a thumbs up or a yay, a Y, or something simple if you've listened to the Grazing Grass Podcast? Something that I've come across recently. Anybody else? Yeah, I've got some. Yep.
All
Got some followers
right.
there. So we're gonna get to know you and get to know what you do.
Now I'm trying to figure out how I work to share my screen. So give me just a moment.
Right on,
I,
Cal.
yeah, it took me a second. First off, I want to apologize. I ordered some cooler weather in Oklahoma here in my studio. The AC is not real good, so I ordered cooler weather and it showed up about 10 days too early. So it's 100 degrees outside here. The
Hmm.
studio's not quite that warm, but I do have a sweat rag. I don't know if it's because of the heat or I'm on the hot seat, but one of the two. Of course, I listened to Robert just a while ago, and he's talking about 114-degree weather, and I'm thinking, well, I shouldn't complain too much.
But that's a dry heat, though. They say it's
It is.
different.
I've been out there. That's totally different.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got
Well,
100 degrees at midnight.
oh
Sure.
yeah. Well, I hope it's not 100 degrees at midnight here. So today we're going to talk about consistency as the key. And before we jump into that, we're going to talk just a little bit about me. I thought I would. Let's see if this will
Yep.
change slides. Nope. There we
Yeah.
go. Um, I'm Cal Hardage. I am yesterday, Jared said at the beginning of the summit, he says, put in the chat what generation farmer you are. And to be honest, I'd never really thought about that. I thought about it. I was like, what generation am I? It's not quite a direct line, but I'm the fourth generation in a couple directions, and um, I thought that's really interesting. Of course, you go back that far, and everyone had a milk cow or two, a few hogs, cow or two. So my great grandfather, he ranched in West Texas, and he had 30 sections of land before the start of the Depression, and he exited the Depression with 6 sections of land. So the Depression was not very good for him. I still have family out there that ranches. That was on my grandma's side. My grandma and grandpa met out there, and they moved to Oklahoma, where it rains a little bit more. Um, they came all the way over to the east side. I'm in northeast Oklahoma. Uh, my grandpa always worked off the farm, but he always had beef cattle. And then my dad, he's had beef cattle, dairy. We've done a lot of different things. He worked off the farm for a while, but he's been on the farm since 85. For myself, I've worked off the farm in education for 23 years, and I've recently became full time with the podcast and the farm. On my mom's side, fourth generation there, my great grandfather dairied not too far from us. And my grandfather, when he was a young adult and got married, he went out to work on pipelines in Pennsylvania and stuff. And he decided it was better to milk cows. So he came home and bought my grandpa's dairy and dairied there till the Corps of Engineers put in a lake. And at that time, their land was purchased and they moved over here close to where I live. They live 2 miles up the road, which is really nice. My grandfather's still alive, 98 years old, still running cattle with my uncle and my cousins. And that's on my mom's side. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we dairied for a number of years, starting when I was barely a teenager and I went to college, came home and dairied with mom and dad for a number of years till we sold out and I went back into education. My whole life, I've been around beef cattle. And then we had that time with um, the dairy cattle. In addition to that, we had hogs when I was little. And then when we dairied, we put in chicken houses. So we ran some chicken houses for a while. Once we sold out of all that, we ran beef cattle. And then about almost 20 years ago, we got some meat goats. And then about 10 years ago, Bit the bullet and got some hair sheep because people told me they were a lot easier. And no one was lying to me. In fact, I sold out completely of the meat goats for a couple years, and I just have a handful now. We operate on owned land, that's my dad's land, and we also operate on leased land. So we actually have 2 beef herds. Dad's beef herd that is on the land on his place, my herd that's on all leased land. The sheep run on the home place, and the goats run on leased land. Of course, at this point, I've only got a handful of goats, but I enjoy the goats, but they cause me the most headache. Some people say they cause you to pull your hair out. I don't necessarily have that problem, but they do give me some headaches. I mentioned I'm the host of the Grazing Grass podcast. I started that in 2020. I sometimes joke that was my COVID project. I was working on my hours really shut down at school. I had more time. I had done some YouTube videos and I really liked it, but I started listening to podcasts and I really just fell in love with podcasts because podcast gives you the ability to, I hate to say this, but to be a passive listener. You can be listening and doing something else, kind of like with this seminar today. You can be listening while doing something else, and it just gives you that ability to intake so much more information. I can be moving cows and listening to podcasts. And I really fell in love with that media, and Clay was doing a great job, and there was other podcasts out there. But one thing I missed, I wanted to hear from producers, people out there doing it. There's places for experts, but I wanted producers. So for the Grazing Grass, we focus, every episode has a grass farmer, as I like to say. It's a grass-based livestock producer that's utilizing regenerative practices. And we started out just sharing or asking about their operation. It has evolved into sharing their journey about what they're doing. And then we talk about their operation, finish up with the famous 4 questions. One goal, or really the main goal I have with this, I started it for very selfish reasons, so I get the opportunity to talk to people. But the huge goal to me with sharing these is wherever you are, you take the next step. If you're running set stock and no pasture divisions, let's divide that up and start some kind of rotation. If you've already got multiple pastures, close a gate. If you're doing a weekly rotation, maybe you need to be looking at a tighter rotation. If you are using chemicals, maybe we should look at not using chemicals. I just want to encourage people to take that next step wherever they are. And actually, that's what leads me to the topic for today, and that's consistency is the key. And when I think about consistency as the key, first I have a question to ask you. And I know you heard this. How do you eat an elephant? I know most of you already got it in your head because we've heard it so much as a kid, but a bite at a time. And that's a great illustration of you have this big project that you need to do. You got to break it down into bite-sized pieces so you can accomplish it, because you're looking at this huge project. And if you're new to regenerative ag, or you're new to some grass-based livestock production principles, sometimes they can be daunting when you look at them all and you're like, well, what to do? Well, let's break it down into steps and just do one step at a time. And that's what I'm saying with the podcast. We just want to encourage you to take that next step. And one thing I noticed about steps, so if I were to go eat an elephant, and I'm not going to right now, I much prefer beef. I haven't had elephant, and it's probably illegal, but I prefer beef. And if I go take one bite today and I go back tomorrow and take another bite, and then I get busy and it may be a couple more days, and then before I know it, I'm going back to take a bite, and it may have been 3 months since I had a bite. At that rate, you're not going to make much progress. And that's why I believe consistency is the key. Let's see. There we go. Consistency is the key. So if you're taking that bite and you're taking that bite every day, you're going to eventually get there. So whatever big project you have in mind, if you're just taking that step each day, you'll eventually get there. And one thing when we think about consistency, what's that mean? How can we do that? And I think it really comes back to our habits and our systems. So when we think about habits, those are those things we do every day. For instance, after I have quite the morning routine, I got a shower, I get dressed, and I'm not going to break all the steps out, but then I make my coffee. So that's my habit each day. I make my coffee. And when we look at those little habits like that, that determines where you are in the future. So if I want to be healthy, just working out each day is going to get me there at some time in the future. But we've got to get that habit in place. And actually, to be honest, I prefer to think of them as systems. It's my system, how I'm doing stuff. And sometimes for me, that makes it easier for me to do all the time. But let's talk about habits or systems. So you can get small improvements that compound over time. So it's like compound interest for your life. So if you're saving money and you put a little bit in, you put a little bit in the following month, you still just have a little bit in there. But you do that over years, you can have a tremendous amount in there. So this is compound interest for your life. And one thing that I don't like talking about, I am very much a positive person, or I believe I am, and I try to encourage others, but we are either going one of two directions. We're improving or we're declining. And I don't like to think about the declining portion, but what am I doing to be better today, be better tomorrow than I am today? And if I'm not doing something, I may be declining. Well, you've got two choices. You're improving or you're declining. I just don't think we stay stagnant. So that's one thing when you look at your systems, you want to make sure you're working towards that improvement. And one thing, if you watch YouTube, you may have came across Justin Rhodes. I love watching his videos and what he's doing on his homestead, but he often discusses 1% better each day. And I love the way he incorporates that into his daily stuff, because he'll be on the video and he'll be like, oh, I'm going to do this because it'll be 1% better. So I try to do that. And if you come over, you'll look around at my place and be like, you're going to have to try harder. I'm working. I'm getting there. But 1% better. So I'm out doing something that comes in my mind, 1% better. How can I do this a little bit better that'll translate further? And an interesting thing from Atomic Habits, and that's a book by James Clear, and a lot of information in here is based upon his book, and I encourage you to read it if you're a reader. He says if you are 1% better each day throughout a whole year, 365 days, that totals up to an improvement of 37%. To me, that's just a crazy amount, and I can't even fathom that, but that just shows you the power there. It really makes my wife happy too, because that means if I just get 1% better each day for a few years, I can be twice the man I am today. So she's really optimistic about this. But one thing when we think about habits and systems, sometimes we get confused with our goals. So let's just break those down. And I know most people, all this that I'm telling you today, you all know, but sometimes it doesn't hurt to have a refresher. So goals are the results you want to achieve, while systems are the processes that lead you to those results. So just a very simple example, I'm in Northeast Oklahoma. If my goal is to get to Oklahoma City, the systems are how I get there. So if I want to be more regenerative, if I want to produce more forage, if I want to have better soil health, those are my goals. And then I've got to have systems in place that leads me there. And some of those habits may be reducing chemicals. They may be rotating your animals, different grazing methods, maybe different species. but those are the systems that get there. So for today, your goals you have, but it's the systems we need to work on. So I think a really important thing when I talk to people just getting started, a lot of times I tell them, just get started. Go get started. Go do it. Go try something. And what I want to encourage is implementation of a system, so that motivation when you go out there and just do something one time, that motivation's high there, but it may be, it may, I lost my train of thought. This happens on my podcast as well. And the great thing about my podcast is that it is recorded and edited. So I tell people all the time, I spend a lot of time editing my podcast, so it makes me sound like I know what I'm doing. Anyway, back to this. When you're implementing a system, so we want to get a system implemented or get this new habit going. The one major thing that'll really help you is if that's part of your identity. And when we think about identity, I identify as a reader. I think readers are leaders, and I think my knowledge, I need to be smarter than I am now. There's a lot of people that will vouch for that, but I try to read a little bit each day, and I identify as a reader, and that makes my implementation of my system or habit easier. And then also, when we're implementing, let's create that habit and system. And James Clear from Atomic Habit breaks down a habit into its 4 parts, and we're going to go through those very simplistic and very quickly. As I watch the time over here, sometimes I get long-winded, and you would be shocked because I have a podcast and I talk too much. That's just surprising. Well, with habits and how they work, James Clear breaks them into 4 parts. We have the cue, we have the craving, we have the response, and the reward. So the cue is the trigger for whatever you're doing. And when I think about, I mentioned a while ago, after I get dressed, I go make a cup of coffee. My trigger is I got dressed, so the next step is I make a cup of coffee. It's just natural. It's what I do now. Now, if I'm trying to do something new, James says you got to make it obvious. You got to make it easy for yourself. Obvious that this is the clue, that this is what you're going to do. And when you're implementing a new habit, new system, how are you going to implement it? Are you going to do it Tuesday at 8 a.m.? You're going to do it after you make your coffee. And if you're going to, the one way that works really good for me, that I mentioned you can do it like Tuesday at 8 a.m. or Thursday evening at 6 p.m. I find with time-based ones, I procrastinate. Maybe for you, it's not a problem. But for me, it's much easier if I do habit stacking. And that's when I put that habit onto another habit I have. I mentioned this a couple times already. I make a cup of coffee. While my coffee is making in my Keurig, and my daughter will be so appalled I ain't even telling people this, I stretch. It's making for a little bit. I do a few stretches. Now, granted, if my daughter's up, I don't do the stretches because she makes fun of me. But if she's not up yet, I make my cup of coffee, and that minute it takes it to make it, 30 seconds, I don't know how long, I do a few stretches. It doesn't amount to much, but I'm counting on that aggregation of marginal gains so that we eventually make some progress with it. Also, with that habit stacking, that's a great way. I have, in addition to my livestock, I have some chickens, I have some quail, some Corturnix quail, and I have some geese. And I go out every evening after supper to feed them and take care of them. That's my routine or my habit. I eat supper, I go out and take care of them. I decided I need to ride a bike more. My wife will tell, it's maybe a midlife crisis. I need to ride a bike more, get in shape better. Well, I have a bike out in my quail barn because when I finish taking care of the quail, I ride the bike over to turn the water off. And I find that if I do that, I'll ride it for a little bit. it's not very long. I'm just doing a little bit. And then I take it back and I'm finished. And when I say habit stacking, I put that with another habit I have. But also the environment came into play there. The bike is sitting right there. I finished my chores. I got to walk by that bike. So either I'm ducking my head and going by it, hoping the bike doesn't see me, or I just say, okay, I'm going to go ride the bike. So that really makes a difference. And as I look at time, I need to talk faster or talk less. So our second stage is craving. And that's where our motivation comes in. And motivation is great in the beginning, but motivation is very hard to sustain. So some things to do. If your goal in doing this system, make it attractive. What's something you really want? And we have to work with the delayed gratification, which is really difficult. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But there we have our habit stacking. You know, we just know we do it right after that. So after we do one habit, we do another one. Motivational ritual. That's where we take a habit we want to establish. Maybe let's say I don't want to ride my bike. In that case, I go out to take care of my quail. But before I take care of them, I have to ride my bike a little bit. And that's preparing something I'm not really motivated to do. I mean, I want the end results, but my daily motivation is lacking. If I tie that to something that I'm more motivated to do, that I only get to do after I've done the other activity, that helps out. So the response is really where it comes in. That's your action or thought. And you want to make this really easy. And when you make it easy, you just want to, so I try and read 10 pages a day. And I don't tell myself I'm reading 10 pages a day. I tell myself I'm reading 1 page. And I'll be honest, often it turns into 10 pages or more. You want it to be 2 minutes or less to do it. I tell myself I'm riding a bike, I'm just going to ride the bike over and turn the water off. Well, at that point, I've done that much, I might as well do the rest. On setting up paddocks for my cows, I tell myself I'm just going to put my reel and tread in post over where I need them tomorrow. Well, after I've done that, I'm like, well, I might as well go ahead and put up my fence for tomorrow and I'll be that far ahead. So make it easy to get started on it. The quality over quantity and action, not motion. And these two are very interesting. There was a University of Florida professor that did a photography class. And first day of class, he divided the students into 2 parts. And he said, this part, you're doing quality. And this part, you're doing quantity. And for the quantity people, you turn in 100 pictures, you have an A. And if you turn in 90, you have a B. And for the quality people, he says, you just turn in 1 picture and we'll grade that picture. So you want it to be your best work, but 1 picture, that's all you have to do. And what he found was the quality people, let me rephrase that. What he found was the quantity people outperformed the quality people. So the quantity people went out and took tons of pictures. They had the action. So they were out there doing it, while the quality people, they were in motion. They were studying how to make that perfect photo. They were looking at how to do it. They were looking at places, but they weren't actually taking action. They were just in motion. And that's a difference that James Clear talks about in his book, Atomic Habits, that we need to do actions. And that's one reason I tell people all the time on the podcast, get started, take that next step, just go do it. It's not going to work out great, or it may not, it may work great. Most times it doesn't for me, but you got to take that step and do it. And don't get in that analysis paralysis moment where you're doing motion by you're reading this, studying this, but you're not taking that action. Our 4th stage is the reward. And to be honest, this is the response to doing it. And we're very much about immediate reward. And we want to make it satisfying to ourselves. And this is what leads you to repeating your system or habit. And I'll be honest, I don't do a good job with this. reward for me putting up the paddock fence is as soon as I go over to the cows, I open it, I can immediately turn them to new grass. And that is very rewarding to me. It's a little delayed. They do talk, he does talk about in the book about reinforcement, and that's using another positive habit to get there. So we have, he calls these the 4 laws of behavior. First law is the cue. Then we have craving, response, and reward. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, make it satisfying. And I come back to consistency is the key, but it's only the beginning. And I like to use the core principle. And I know all the people who's taught me how to do PowerPoints and slides and stuff, they're like, you're doing this wrong. Why are you introducing something new at the end? Anyway, the core principle to me is consistently apply an action, observe what is happening, reflect upon that, because reflection, observation is so important. Reflection, equally important. But then you reflect upon it, you've got to take some kind of action based upon that reflection. And that's when you enhance your system or enhance what you're doing. If I'm putting out that fence each day, I'm observing what the cows are grazing, and I'm reflecting upon how can I do this better. And then when I go out to do it the next time, I may give them a bigger paddock. I may give them a smaller paddock. I ran through that pretty quick because when I did this earlier as a test run, I was right at 27 minutes, but I guess I talked more this time because I'm at 28 and I didn't cover quite as much as I thought I would.
Good job, Cal. Good job.
Oh, well, thank you.
You made it through. Yeah, contact information there. How often does your podcast come out?
Every Wednesday.
Every Wednesday.
Okay. Today's episode is a bison farmer from Alberta. Talked to Stuart Stoudinger about his operation and what they're doing. A really good episode. It is the first bison farmer we've had on the podcast. One thing with the podcast, we try and have a nice variety or wide range of types of livestock, sizes, experience, because I want people to see them in the episodes. Yeah. One more thing, Jared. I want to apologize for the selfie. When I had to find a picture of me, I found out I don't take very many good pictures of myself. Oh, so there we go.
All right. It's all right. It looks like you just got your working clothes on and you're out doing it. Oh, that's great,
exactly.
Cal. We appreciate you being part of this. Tell us what what they can find on the gift code.
So if you go to the gift code, that goes to the insiders for Grazing Grass or Grazing Grass Insiders. And there we have some bonus episodes, some additional content. And that's for a free month there. It is something fairly new that we're doing with the podcast. So I have grand ideas for it. It's just based upon time getting there. I'd love to make like an index of the podcast episodes where you can click on bison and it goes to where we talk about bison. South Pole. And I'll go to where we talked about South Pole. And I've been playing with that with Spotify. I have some Spotify playlists that'll soon be there. That'll be by species and by geographical region, because I know some people are like, I only want to listen to podcasts from people in my area. So that's a Grazing Grass Insiders. You can get there from our website, and there is a code for you to use, so you get a free month.
I like it. Oh, well, very good. Thank you very much.
Do I have just one more moment?
Sure.
I'm sorry. We also have the Grazing Grass community on Facebook. We started a forum. It didn't take off very good because it was off of Facebook. We ended up moving over to Facebook. And I just want to say that Grazing Grass community or Grazing Grass community group on Facebook, search for it, answer your questions, join, is a tremendous, encouraging, positive group that can answer your questions, and maybe you can help someone with their journey.
Okay. Cool. I like it.